You're listening to Leading Up with Udemy, a podcast that serves as a guide for developing your skills as an emerging or seasoned leader. Together, we can work, lead, and live differently to create a better world. I'm Kelly Schwartz, Senior Content Marketing Manager at Udemy, and today we have a special mini episode for you drawn from our recent virtual event, Udemy Forward 2024. In it, we discussed why skills-based organizations are growing in popularity and touched on the role of generative AI in companies. Today, you'll hear from Paul Kent, the Senior L&D Manager at PepsiCo, where he's been for over 20 years. Paul spoke with Udemy's Chief Learning Officer, Melissa Daimler, in conversation with Ryan Jamieson, Chief Technology Officer and co-founder at Caliber. Paul begins by talking about the hot topic of how skills-based practices have impacted engagement, performance, and retention at PepsiCo. All right, let's dive in.
Well, what's the point? If we're going to build a skills-based economy in it, and we want to know what that means, well, then what do we want to get to? And that is better performance, right? It's a war for talent at the moment. So we want to make sure that we're giving the best possible experience to employees to keep them within the organization and help them develop and grow. Our internal branding on this is develop and grow. We can link the correlation between learning happening and performance, but it still has to be the right learning. It has to be focused on the right things, and it has to be focused on the right skills, the skills of the future that we're looking at. So learning for the sake of learning is not something that we do. We know that people who do learning stay in the organization on average 20% more than those who don't engage in learning, right? So we know that there's an impact. Again, that's correlation, not causation. People are not necessarily saying, I'm staying because I did a learning program. But we see that those are the impacts that we're seeing on our scorecards coming out in the areas that we set out day one to measure.
Learning focused on the right skills is critical not only for employees' growth and development, but also to increase their overall engagement at work and the likelihood of staying at the company longer. Paul details what he sees as the core skills to develop in employees to help achieve these ends.
So I think there's an IBM study that says the half-life of perishable skills is somewhere at 2.5 years. Even today, I just quickly checked that, and I used Copilot to check it as well. And I said, what's the half-life of AI? And it said it's running at about 2 years. So half of what we know of AI in 2 years will have changed. So that means that our core skills are always changing. And if the half-life is that short, then going out to the marketplace and trying to buy those skills is very, very difficult. You've got to develop them. We looked at, well, what are the core skills for everyone? And an example I'll give is that, digital knowledge, right? And I'll use knowledge for the moment on this because it'll make sense in a second. Digital knowledge was something that was somewhere in everyone. Some call it digital acumen. Some call it digital proficiency. Some call it digital fluency. So what we've set about doing is developing the core capabilities that we think everyone should have, right? And just to put a name on it, we call it digital fluency. It's just called digital fluency. And that was really, really important for us to map out those core skills that everyone would know. The additional ones, things like stakeholder analysis, ethical and social responsibility, storytelling, resilience, data and analytics. These are all areas that we said we want everyone to have a base of these core skills. And then as we go through the next layers of, well, what is it we want you to do? And what is it we want you to be? There are different skills that we'll approach. And we set about building this inventory of skills, but the nomenclature for those was standardized across the organization.
It's tricky as a learning leader to balance and prioritize which skills to develop, especially when what comprises those core skills is constantly evolving. Paul offers advice on how to approach this problem.
It's about starting with the end in mind, right? It's about starting with what is it we want the outcome to be. So when we talk about a skills inventory, we use things like the Gartner hype cycle to see, well, what are the skills that we want to get to? So what's the hype cycle telling us? And then when we looked at what we have within the organization, because only then can you do a gap analysis of where we want to be and where we are. Who do we have and what are they good at? And then where do we need to develop them? So that was key for us from a starting point of our skills inventory. So when we talk about a skills inventory, the Josh Bersin model talks about your role, the jobs within a role, the capabilities within the jobs, and then the skills within the capabilities. Well, look one step further on that. What are the behaviors that you want to see as a result of those skills? So that's how you'll translate from a skill into your actionable outcomes. Because once we can map the behavior all the way through to an outcome, we then have something sustainable that we can talk about.
Translating learning into concrete skills and actionable outcomes is important. But how do you make that learning stick? And how do you then measure that? Here's Paul again.
The words of Nigel Payne are stuck to my head at the moment of test and measure, right? For anyone that's listened to Nigel Payne speak on this. For me, and by the way, when I say test and measure, that does not mean knowledge checks. But a phrase I like to use is to work in the flow of learning. So test the learning by bringing the work scenario into the learning. So when we talk about making it stick, we'll make it real. So if we learn about concepts and we say, well, and the old model of learning was, I'm going to teach you something that you might need to know in the future so that whenever that happens, you'll have it. Well, no, I need to teach you for the now. And it's that moment of need. So create the moment of need in the learning. So bring examples of what it is we want to do. What are the outcomes? What are we building towards? So test the skill in the learning is the biggest piece of advice that I can give. When I talk about measure the impact. So if you set out, and it's amazing how many times in learning, we start out not knowing the destination. I don't get in the car and not know my destination. I know where I'm going to go to. So I know that success is when I get to the end of my journey that I've planned in my head. But if you're doing learning without having a destination set out, how do you know you've ever got there? So when you come to measure it, it's that, you make it a SMART objective. You say, and it might be something very simple. We've got a negotiation training that we do. We say we want to increase quality, decrease cost, and increase the rate at which we get the product. So, okay, we can measure that because it's a targeted outcome. But sometimes it might be a little bit harder, but you've got to dig deeper and say, well, what is the measurement we are looking? What is the right measure? We're actually going to start with what is the result we want.
Something else that's essential to cementing that learning is creating a safe space and community in which learners feel empowered and free to be curious and make mistakes.
And it's a brilliant point that, first of all, creating physical spaces for people to learn, but actually creating environments in which people learn it is critical. The study that we did was we took a baseline. We took 3 focus groups. We took a baseline of individual learners who were not prompted to learn. And that sat at 3% of those people returned to learning every week for 5 weeks when we studied it. We took individuals who were told we needed them to do learning. It rose to 9% for individuals who were given a learning task, returned to their learning every week for 5 weeks. When we created a cohort of learning, it went over 80% of people who returned to learning every week for 5 weeks. So that cohort model, it works on the science of operant conditioning. If there's a consequence at the end of it, if I've got to meet a cohort of people and I've now got to show up and be present, I'm more likely to do it. So we found a lot of people, what they were doing, and I do this a little bit as well, was snooze, dismiss on that activity I set for myself. But we can't snooze, dismiss when people are there waiting for us. So operant conditioning drove us to be there. And often it's like when you go for the run, you mightn't like the first 100 meters of the run, but the hardest step is to the starting line. Once you get there, it's fine. And that's what happened with cohort learning. And then, so that's how we got them there. And once we got them there, it stuck because the conditions were set for them.
AI is changing our world quickly and is arguably one of the most important skills for an employee to have knowledge about today. Paul discussed how he sees companies leveraging AI as a complement to, but not a replacement for, human intelligence.
AI is becoming part of everything we do. And I love that human part of it, right? We would always say that the formula for this is HI plus AI equals MI. So human intelligence plus mixed intelligence gives us, or plus artificial intelligence gives us mixed intelligence. But what we're seeing is the future of work. We talked about, the availability of people for your scenarios. Well, that can be replaced by AI. We can have scenarios where we can have people practice through simulations using AI, using real data, and they output it. And it's making the human better. And that's the advance in this, is it's giving them information to get to the next level. At a very simple level, we're using Copilot for our meeting minutes, right? And that's going to save absolute loads of time on people who do meeting minutes at the end of meetings. They'll take the transcription from Teams, they'll put it into Copilot, but it's not as simple as just putting it in there. They need to learn the prompt. What's the prompt for it? And the prompt might be, give me the key notes of the meeting. So we're teaching prompts, and we're developing the people to prompt better to make us more beneficial.
It wouldn't be a conversation with learning professionals without asking the experts themselves what they're learning. Here, Paul sums up his current pursuits.
we're learning partnerships, we're learning networks, right? We're learning whether that partnership is with AI making us better, whether that partnership is with our suppliers and AI to make us better, doing things like 3D printing of spare parts. We're learning that we are better as a cohort and as a group. And we said that from a learning and development point of view, we learn better in groups. But as organizations, we learn better when we partner up with other organizations in this space, similar to what we've done with you guys at Udemy, but all over the organization. That's what we're learning.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and gained some insights into how you can apply skills-based development practices to your company or even your own career. To listen to the full episodes of all 7 seasons of Leading Up, go to our show notes. Leading Up is produced in partnership with Pod People. Our original theme is by Soundboard. Thanks for listening.